My name is James Carter, and for the past 5 years, I've been trying to be a father to a boy who never wanted me. I married Victoria knowing she had a son, Logan. I knew being a stepfather wouldn't be easy, but I never imagined it would be this hard. I provided for him, put him through private school, gave him everything I never had growing up. But none of it mattered. To Logan, I was always just James, his mother's husband, a man who happened to live in his house. No matter how hard I tried, I could never compete with his real father, Derek. Derek was a ghost, drifting in and out of Logan's life whenever it suited him. He was unreliable, jobless, and always full of empty promises. And yet, Logan worshipped him. Every time Derek showed up, Logan would act like I didn't exist. I told myself I was okay with it. That one day, Logan would see who really cared for him. That one day, he'd call me Dad and mean it. That day never came. Instead, came his 18th birthday, the night that changed everything. The bar was louder than usual. I had let Logan throw his birthday party at Carter's Tavern, my whiskey bar in downtown Chicago. It wasn't something I wanted, but Victoria convinced me. She said it would make Logan happy. I had my doubts. Teenagers filled the place, laughing, drinking, celebrating. I kept a close watch, making sure no one got too drunk. The last thing I needed was a bunch of underage kids causing trouble in my bar. And then he walked in. Derek. The moment he stepped through the doors, I felt my stomach tighten. He strolled in like he owned the place, arms wide open, grinning like some kind of hero. "There's my boy," he shouted, pulling Logan into a sloppy hug. Logan beamed like he had just won the lottery. I stood behind the bar, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. I had spent years providing for this kid, giving him a life Derek never could. But one drunken visit was all it took to win him over. I swallowed my anger. Tonight was Logan's night. But Derek wasn't just here to see his son, he wanted drinks. "Come on, Carter. Pour me a whiskey," he slurred, slamming a fist on the counter. "Or are you too uptight to serve your family?" I exhaled slowly. "You're drunk, Derek. Go home." He laughed. "Go home? Oh, that's rich. You think just because you throw money at my kid, that makes you his father?" Logan stepped in. "James, just let him have one drink. It's my birthday." I looked at him, stunned. "Logan, he's already wasted." "So what? It's not your problem." I kept my voice steady. "No." Derek turned to the crowd. "Hear that, everyone? Big shot James Carter thinks he gets to control us." The bar fell silent. All eyes were on me. I waved at security. Within seconds, 2 of my guys grabbed Derek by the arms. "Get your hands off me," he roared, struggling. Logan's face twisted in fury. "James, stop." I didn't. As Derek was dragged out, he turned back, eyes filled with venom. "You just made a big mistake, Carter. A big mistake." And then he was gone. But the damage was already done. Logan spun on me. "You humiliated him." I sighed. "Logan, he was making a scene. You didn't have to do that. You always act like you're in charge of everything. I wish you'd just—" He stopped himself, fists clenched. I met his eyes. "Say it." He hesitated, then spat out the words that cut deeper than any knife. "You're not my father. You never have been." Silence. I felt Victoria's hand on my arm, but I barely noticed. I looked at Logan one last time and nodded. "Happy birthday." Then, I walked away. As I sat in my office, the sounds of the party faded into the background. For 5 years, I had given everything to this family. And tonight, I finally understood. It had never been enough. I didn't sleep that night. Logan's words rang in my mind, repeating like an endless loop, "You're not my father. You never have been." It wasn't the first time someone had said something like that to me. I had been called worse things by people who didn't know me, who didn't understand. But hearing it from Logan, hearing it from my own son, felt like a punch to the gut. No matter how much I tried to ignore it, I couldn't. There was a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that I had failed. That I was never enough for him. And yet, the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I couldn't keep chasing after someone who didn't want me there. The next morning, I went about my usual routine. I opened up Carter's Tavern, ran through the orders, and wiped down the bar, but my mind wasn't on the business. It was on Logan. I couldn't shake the image of him storming out of the tavern, his back turned on me. And then came the call. Victoria's voice, sharp and filled with concern, pulled me out of my thoughts. She asked if I'd seen Logan. When I said no, she explained that he hadn't come home the previous night. She sounded frantic, desperate. I could hear her trying to stay calm, but I could feel the fear in her tone. It struck a nerve. If Logan was out there, if something had happened to him, I wasn't about to sit by and wait. Without thinking twice, I left the tavern and headed toward the last place I knew Logan had been, the place where I had a bad feeling he might be, Derek's apartment. Derek had always been a troublemaker, and it didn't take much to guess that he could be involved in whatever mess Logan had gotten himself into. The building wasn't much to look at, an old, run-down complex on the edge of town. The kind of place where hope had long since left, and the air felt heavy with the weight of poor choices. I wasn't expecting to find anything good here. I knocked on Derek's door, hard, but there was no answer. I knocked again, louder this time, and still nothing. Just as I was about to give up and turn around, I heard a noise, a rustling, the faint sound of someone moving around inside. I tried the handle, and to my surprise, the door creaked open. I stepped inside. The moment I did, the world went dark. A sharp pain struck the back of my head. My knees buckled beneath me as I collapsed to the floor. The room spun, and I struggled to regain my senses, but it was too late. Strong hands grabbed me by the shoulders, and before I knew it, I was thrown into a chair. My wrists were bound tightly with rope. I fought to clear my head, to think. But everything was moving too fast, and the pain in my skull made it hard to focus. I looked up, and there was Derek, standing before me with a smirk on his face, like he'd been waiting for this moment all along. The man was trouble, through and through, and I knew there was no way this was going to end peacefully. "You've got some nerve showing up here, Carter," Derek said, though his tone wasn't as mocking as I expected. There was something deeper in his voice, something darker. The two goons standing behind him looked even worse than I expected. Their faces were hard, their eyes cold. These weren't the kind of people who hesitated to use force when they needed to. I realized quickly that I had walked into something much worse than I had anticipated. This wasn't just about Logan, it was about money, power, and debts that went deeper than I wanted to know. Derek crouched down in front of me, examining me like I was a specimen under a microscope. I stayed silent, refusing to show any weakness. "Looks like you're in the wrong place at the wrong time," he said after a long pause. The faintest hint of a grin tugged at the corners of his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. I wasn't sure what kind of game Derek was playing, but I knew one thing, this wasn't a coincidence. Whatever mess Logan had gotten tangled up in, Derek was behind it. I had to get out of here. I had to find Logan before it was too late. Derek began pacing, his footsteps echoing through the small, dimly lit apartment. "You're a smart man, Carter," he said. "You'll understand when I tell you that I need a favor." I didn't say anything, but my mind raced. There it was. The moment I had been waiting for. The catch. Derek stopped pacing and turned to face me. "I'm in some deep, you see. I owe some people a lot of money. $50,000 to be exact." He leaned in closer, his breath sour. "And I don't plan on paying it back. Not unless I have to." The pieces started falling into place. Derek wasn't just the local troublemaker, he was in over his head. The question was, how did Logan fit into all this? "You know how it works, right?" Derek continued. "People like me don't just disappear when they owe money. They need something to make them worth keeping around. And you, Carter, you're the key. I felt my stomach drop. Something wasn't right. He was looking for leverage, and I had a horrible feeling it was going to be Logan. Before I could react, Derek gave a signal to one of his men, and in an instant, Logan appeared at the door. He was barely recognizable, his face bruised, his clothes torn. His eyes were wide, filled with fear, and for a moment, I couldn't tell if he was relieved to see me or terrified. "Logan," I said, my voice tight. He didn't speak. He just stood there, his hands trembling, as if he was trying to decide whether to run or stay. I could see it in his eyes, he was scared. And this wasn't the Logan I knew. This wasn't my son. Derek motioned for the goons to let me go, and they cut the ropes around my wrists. But as soon as I stood up, I knew things had already gone too far. There was no turning back now. I locked eyes with Logan. He didn't look at me the same way anymore. The distance between us felt infinite, like we were two strangers standing in a room full of ghosts. I wanted to say something, to tell him everything would be okay, that I would fix this, but the words stuck in my throat. All I could do was stare back at him, unsure of what to do next. The silence between us was deafening. My son stood there, a mere shadow of the person I remembered. His bruises were evidence of his struggle, and yet, there was something more that I couldn't quite place, a sense of resignation in his eyes. He had given up. And in that moment, I felt the full weight of my failure as a father. Derek was watching us with amusement, like a cat toying with a mouse. His presence loomed in the room, a constant reminder that we weren't in control of anything here. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. I had to act fast. There was no room for mistakes, no time for hesitation. If I didn't do something now, everything would fall apart. "Logan," I said, my voice firm, though it trembled inside. "You need to get out of here. You don't owe these people anything. Whatever they've got you into, I'll get you out. I promise." But Logan didn't move. He didn't even react. It was as though he hadn't heard me at all. I wanted to grab him, shake him, and tell him that I was still his father, that I could still fix this, that we could still be a family. But the more I looked at him, the more I realized something. He wasn't the same person I had raised. He had changed, and I had no idea how to get through to him. Derek was getting impatient. "Enough of this sentimental crap, Carter," he sneered, walking toward us. "You want your son back? You'll have to play my game." He paused, a wicked smile spreading across his face. "I have a little business arrangement for you. You take care of my problem, and I'll let Logan go. Simple as that." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Derek wasn't just messing with me, he was making an ultimatum. He was holding Logan hostage, using him as leverage for whatever deal he had in mind. And I knew, deep down, that I had no choice but to play along. If I didn't, Logan would pay the price. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I hated myself for asking, but I couldn't afford to let Logan down again. I had already failed him once. Derek chuckled darkly, his eyes gleaming with malice. "It's simple. I need you to take care of some business for me. You're a man of connections, Carter. I know you know people, and you can get things done. I need a shipment delivered. A little something special, you know? A piece of merchandise that's very important to certain individuals." I felt my stomach turn. I knew exactly what he was talking about: drugs, guns, something illegal. Derek was asking me to get involved in something I couldn't get out of. And the worst part was, I didn't see how I could refuse without risking Logan's life. "But if you get caught," I started, but Derek cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Don't worry about that, Carter. I've made sure everything's in place. Just get it done, and I'll make sure Logan walks away from this with his life intact." His smile was cold, unfeeling. "Do this, and I'll let him go. Fail, and I'll let you figure out how you want to live with that." His words hung in the air, thick with threat. I was trapped. There was no easy way out. Derek turned his back to us, signaling to one of his men. "You're not going anywhere until you agree," he said casually. The goon stepped forward, blocking the exit. Logan still hadn't moved. He was a ghost, standing in the corner, his eyes vacant, lost. I didn't want to do it. The very thought of breaking the law, of becoming involved in Derek's twisted world, made me sick to my stomach. But what choice did I have? My son's life was at stake. And for the first time in my life, I realized how far I was willing to go to save him. "You've got yourself a deal," I said, my voice steady but hollow. I was lying to myself, telling myself that this was the right thing to do. But deep down, I knew that the moment I agreed, I had crossed a line I could never uncross. Derek turned back to face me, his smile widening. "I knew you'd come around, Carter," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "I'll make the arrangements. You do your part, and everything will be fine." But as I looked at Logan, I saw the look of betrayal in his eyes. I had made my choice, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a defeat. The weight of the decision pressed down on me like 1,000 pounds. "Take him away," Derek ordered one of his men. The goon grabbed Logan by the arm and pulled him toward the door, but for the first time, Logan resisted. He struggled, his face contorting with anger and fear. "Dad," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "What have you done? Why are you doing this?" I didn't have an answer. The word stuck in my throat. All I could do was watch as they dragged him out of the room, his eyes never leaving mine. The door slammed shut behind them, and I was left alone with my choices. For the first time in a long while, I was truly alone. I had made a deal with the devil, and now there was no going back. The world I had built, the life I had tried so hard to protect, was crumbling. And I had no idea how to stop it. The days following my agreement with Derek were a blur. I was living in a constant state of tension, always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the inevitable fallout. I didn't know who to trust anymore, or if I even trusted myself. The weight of the deal I had made was suffocating, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Logan's face. His eyes haunted me, his words echoing in my head. "What have you done? Why are you doing this?" The guilt gnawed at me, deeper and deeper with each passing hour. I had told myself it was for Logan, that I was doing it to save him. But now, I wasn't so sure. What kind of father had I become? A man willing to sell his soul to save his son? Was it worth it? Was Logan's life worth the price I had just agreed to pay? The night after I made the deal, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the walls. It was quiet, too quiet. The city outside seemed distant, like it belonged to a different world. I didn't belong in this world anymore, not after what I had just done. I knew Derek wasn't the type of person to just let things go. He would expect results. He would want the shipment delivered, and if I failed, I could kiss Logan goodbye. There would be no second chances. I ran my hands through my hair, the pressure mounting on my chest. I had to go through with it. There was no turning back now. The next morning, I found myself at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. Derek's men had arranged the meeting. As I pulled up to the building, the sense of dread in my stomach only grew stronger. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. The moment that would determine not only my fate, but Logan's as well. A tall man in a black leather jacket stood by the door. He gave me a sharp nod as I approached, wordlessly motioning for me to follow. The air was thick with tension, every step echoing in the empty space around us. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit, the faint sound of something dripping in the distance. It felt like a scene from a nightmare. I looked around, waiting for Derek to show up. I knew he'd be here soon, but there was something off about the place. It was too quiet, too still. "You're late," a voice from behind me said. I spun around to see Derek stepping out of the shadows, his grin wide and unsettling. "I'm not late. Just making sure I have everything in order," I replied, trying to mask the unease in my voice. Derek wasn't the kind of person you crossed, and right now, I was doing just that. He didn't respond at first. Instead, he walked past me and gestured to the far side of the warehouse. There, in the corner, sat a large crate, secured with thick ropes and chains. "You know what's inside, right?" Derek asked, his voice casual but his eyes sharp. "I trust you'll handle this shipment with the utmost care." I nodded, though my stomach churned at the thought of what was in that crate. I had an idea, but I wasn't sure. Whatever it wasn't going to be easy to deliver. And the consequences of messing it up weren't something I wanted to think about. "Get it done, Carter," Derek said, his voice dropping into something more serious. "You don't want to disappoint me." His words were a threat, clear as day. There was no room for error. And as I moved toward the crate to inspect it, I realized just how deep into this I was. I had crossed the line, and there was no turning back. I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me. My mind raced as I thought of Logan. Where was he? What was he doing? Was he still safe? I had no way of knowing. No way of contacting him. The hours felt like days as I worked with Derek's men to load the shipment onto the truck. Every movement felt deliberate, planned, nothing could go wrong. But with each passing minute, the tension only grew. I could feel Derek's eyes on me, waiting for me to slip up, just a moment of weakness that would cost me everything. When the truck was finally loaded and ready to go, Derek clapped me on the back, a laugh escaping his lips. "You're doing great, Carter. You keep this up, and maybe we can talk about Logan. Get him back to you, safe and sound." But his words didn't comfort me. They only made me more anxious. Logan's life was still in Derek's hands, and the moment I delivered this shipment, it would either be a win or a death sentence for both of us. I didn't feel like a hero. I didn't feel like a father doing what was necessary for his son. I felt like a puppet, controlled, manipulated, trapped in a game I had no chance of winning. As I drove the truck through the dark streets, the weight of my decisions pressed down on me. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind was elsewhere. It was impossible to ignore the images of Logan, trapped in whatever nightmare Derek had created for him. I had promised to get him back. I had promised to save him. But what was I really doing? What kind of world was I bringing him back to? I knew the answer all too well, a world that was just as dangerous and unforgiving as the one I had become a part of. I arrived at the drop-off location, an old industrial complex in the middle of nowhere. There were no signs, no markings, just the shadow of a building looming in the distance. As I stepped out of the truck, I was greeted by two of Derek's men. They didn't say much, just nodded and began unloading the crate. I watched them, unable to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. But I didn't have time to question it. I had to stay focused. The deal was almost done. And once it was, I would get Logan back. I had to believe that. But as the last of the shipment was unloaded, I heard something that made my blood run cold. "Where's the money?" one of the men asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Derek's men didn't know I had no idea about the money. They were expecting it. And now, I realized that I had walked right into a trap. The air around me suddenly felt colder, and my heart skipped a beat as I realized the situation was slipping beyond my control. The men were looking at me with cold, calculating eyes, waiting for an explanation that I didn't have. I tried to steady my breathing, my mind scrambling for a solution, but the more I thought, the more impossible it seemed. I had been so sure that once the shipment was handed over, everything would fall into place. Logan would be safe, and I would be free of the hell I had put us through. But now, I had just walked into a trap, one that Derek had set for me. "Where's the money?" one of the men repeated, his voice colder now, more insistent. I stopped myself, fighting to hold on to any semblance of control. "I don't have the money," I said, the words leaving my mouth like a confession. I was never told about any payment. I was just told to make the delivery. The men exchanged looks, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I could feel their suspicion growing, the realization dawning that I had been left in the dark, that I wasn't part of whatever deal Derek had set up. "This doesn't make sense," one of them muttered, his hand instinctively going to the gun at his side. "You're telling us that Derek's sending you here without the payment?" And you don't know anything about it? I swear, I said, my voice almost breaking. I don't know what's going on. I only agreed to the deal to get Logan back. I didn't. Before I could finish, the man who had been quiet up until now stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. You're lying, he said, his tone cold and sharp. I shook my head, the panic rising inside me. I'm not lying. I don't know anything about the money. The man's eyes shifted to his companion, and they exchanged a brief, silent conversation, a wordless agreement passing between them. One of them pulled out a phone and dialed a number, speaking in a low, hushed voice. I could hear the faint rumble of Derek's voice through the phone, but I couldn't make out the words. When he hung up, he turned back to me, his face hardening. Derek wants to see you, he said. Now. I didn't argue. What choice did I have? I was already in too deep, and now it seemed like I had no way out. I had put everything on the line, my son's life, my own future, all for a chance at redemption. But now I was beginning to realize that Derek had never intended to help me. I had been nothing more than a pawn in his game. And as much as I hated the thought, I knew the truth now. Derek was never going to let me go. Not until I had paid the price for my involvement. The drive to Derek's compound was long and silent. The men didn't speak to me, and I didn't dare speak to them. The truck's headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the road ahead, but the further we went, the more oppressive the silence felt. I could feel my palms sweating, the adrenaline flooding my system, but I had no way of knowing what awaited me. When we arrived, I was led through a series of dark, narrow hallways, the walls lined with cold, unforgiving metal. Finally, we reached a heavy door, and one of the men knocked before entering. Inside, Derek was seated behind a large desk, his usual cocky smile replaced by a stern, unreadable expression. He looked up as I entered, his gaze calculating. So, Carter, he said, his voice casual but carrying an underlying menace. It seems you found yourself in a bit of a bind. I didn't answer. What was there to say? I had known this was coming. I had known from the moment I made the deal that there would be no easy way out. Derek leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled together as he studied me. You know, I gave you a chance. I gave you a shot at getting your son back. But you couldn't even follow through with that. How was I supposed to know about the money? I snapped, the frustration bubbling to the surface. You never told me anything about it. I've done everything you asked. Derek's eyes darkened, and for a moment, I thought he might strike me. But instead, he chuckled darkly, shaking his head. You're right. I never did tell you about the money. And that's where you made your mistake. You should have asked. You should have known better than to trust someone like me. You're using me, I said, the anger rising inside me. You never intended to help me get Logan back. This was never about him. It was about control. Derek's smile returned, but it wasn't the same. It was a cruel, cold smile, one that sent a chill down my spine. Of course, it's about control. Everything is about control. And you, Carter, are just another tool to help me get what I want. I clenched my fists, trying to hold back the urge to lash out. The man I had trusted, the man I thought could help me, was nothing more than a monster playing a sick game. And now, I had to face the consequences. I gave you a chance, Derek continued, his voice cold, devoid of any remorse. But now, you've outlived your usefulness. Before I could respond, one of the men entered the room, his face tense. He whispered something in Derek's ear, and Derek's eyes flicked to me, the realization setting in. Seems like you've been running out of time, Carter, he said. And now, it's too late for you. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at Derek, the finality in his words settling over me. The walls of the room seemed to close in, and I knew that no matter what I did, I was in too deep. Derek had played his hand, and I was powerless to stop it. Please, I said, desperation seeping into my voice. Let me see my son. I'll do whatever you want. Just let me see Logan. Derek's eyes flickered with something, amusement, perhaps. You really think you still have something to offer, Carter? You're just a man who's already given everything, and now you have nothing left. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. Please, Derek, I'll do anything. But Derek didn't respond. He merely leaned back in his chair, the finality of his decision clear in his eyes. As I stood there, powerless, I knew one thing for sure: my fight for Logan had just taken a deadly turn.